One of the very first things, well, I guess the very first thing I should do is introduce myself. I'm Dr. Erin Shaw, and I am just a facilitator today. Shelley House is our just amazing presenter. She was actually a student in my UDL class a couple of years ago, and then went on to complete our graduate program as one of the first 5 online teachers certified in our state. I'm so proud of her. And she really took our universal design for learning materials and helped me perfect it last year for our first online teaching academy cohort who came through UCA. 31 out of 32 students passed and have their online teaching certificate now. Now the 32nd person apparently never even attempted the exam. So I feel like it's a win. It's a 31 out of 31. But Shelley is going to share today just an overview of UDL. But before she does, and I just I might have stolen your thunder, Shelley, I'm not sure, but I'll let you also introduce and tell what you're doing. But apparently, because this was part of our recruitment professional development for our online programs, I am obligated to share the online degree programs. I am the program coordinator now for the School Library Media and Information Technologies program. I was the former program coordinator also for the Instructional Technology program, but we now have a fantastic new addition, Dr. Allison Freed. She has taken that over. If you're interested in any of these programs, I would love to share information with you, or I can also put you in contact with the program coordinators. I know that our school counseling program is phenomenal. Our literacy programs, especially the dyslexia endorsement, it's just huge right now, we know, in K-12, especially here in Arkansas, with the initiatives going on. So we have lots of programs, and they're all online. So they are there. So Shelley, I am going to turn it over to you and just let you take it away. And I'll stop sharing once I figure that out. I had a media specialist.
Well, Zoom is Zoom. Hi, all. My name is Shelley House. I use she, her pronouns. For anyone who cannot see me, I am a very light-skinned, super white, Scottish, white female. I have red hair. It is just past my shoulders. It's curly. It is under-dyed pine green, my favorite color, and I'm wearing a blue shirt and glasses. I am the former fine arts specialist for the Arkansas Department of Education for all K-12 music, dance, theater, and visual art programs. I also taught in Central Arkansas high schools for 11 years, mostly in technical theater, which is everything in theater that's not acting. I'm a designer, and I have also taught visual art as well. I recently, as in just in April, moved to Washington State. I'm living in Vancouver, Washington, which is just across the Columbia River from Portland. And I decided that I wanted to return to my passion. Dr. Shaw helped me a lot with so many recommendations. And I'm going to go back to the high school classroom next year in Ridgefield, Washington, to teach visual art and to lead the technical theater crews. So I am pumped about that. That is what I love to do. It really is. So I am going to share a couple of materials with you in the chat. I like to make my presentation directly available to you. I just posted that in there. I will be sharing my screen to show it, but if you don't like staring at a shared screen, you can minimize Zoom and go through the slides yourself. If you also would like to use a screen reader or any other assistive technologies, you have direct access to the file to be able to do so rather than relying on the shared screen. So that is the first thing. And I'm also going to be sharing with you a Jamboard. And I'm happy there's only a couple of us in here. That's awesome. So please, if you have a question or a comment or a complaint, just go ahead and interrupt me, please, and ask that question. You can type it in the chat. I will try to look, but Dr. Shaw, I will ask you to help. But it's totally fine to unmute and ask your question out loud. You can have your camera on or off. It is completely up to you in that regard. Here is the Jamboard that is also linked within the slides presentation. So you should have direct access to both now. You are only a viewer on the slides presentation, but you are an editor on the Jamboard. And as we go through, I'll be giving you some prompts for what to do with that. So that's all of my housekeeping. I think we know how to ask questions. We have access to the materials. I think I've gotten everything. And if I haven't, of course, you know that you are very, very welcome to interrupt me at any point. So welcome. Welcome to our session, UDL Teacher's Guide. We are going to be going through these items and trying to meet these goals. The first thing we're going to do is talk about a paradigm shift. We're going to talk about how to think about the aspects of UDL that are different from the way that you may have in the past. The goal there is to recognize the need for new approaches, even though we tend to function in older systems. Next, we're going to talk about what UDL is. What is it? We're going to define it and then place it within existing systems. We are going to explain the wide benefits of UDL approaches. Basically, we're going to answer, who does UDL benefit? And the third thing, we're going to talk about UDL itself, which is a framework that has 3 guidelines. And I'm going to give you some practical tips and a quick start guide. I boiled it down for you so that you can apply even just one aspect of it in the future. And that will help. Even one thing is a good thing. We're going to define the guidelines, develop a toolbox of strategies. Then we're going to look at an example lesson and some planning resources. You're going to analyze how strategies are used in a sample lesson, and you're going to create your own UDL lesson, but probably on your own time. However, I will give you all of my contact information so that if you have a question or you want to bounce some ideas later on, I would be thrilled. I'm like thrilled to help you out because I love this. And I really do believe that the UDL framework and principles is the pathway to equality in education and to happy, healthy teachers and students, truly. So here is the Jamboard. I put a QR code on here just in case you wanted to have the slides presentation on your screen and the Jamboard on your phone. That is there if you want it. You certainly don't have to put it on your phone. And anytime you see the Jamboard logo over here, this is a clickable button that will take you to the Jamboard. So whenever you see that, that means on that slide in the presentation, we're going to be doing something on that Jamboard. So let's try that first. The first thing is on slide 1 down here, slide 1 of the Jamboard. Please use Jamboard's marker or shape tool to mark your spot in the natural state. I will show you, if you've never used Jamboard, or if you have, but you've just forgotten, here's how to use that. You can click here. I recommend selecting the highlighter or the marker just because it's thicker, and you can do it however you want. You can put an X on Little Rock, which is where I previously lived. You can grab the little circle right here and draw a little circle where your spot is. It's up to you. I'm going to make Arkansas bigger though. Yoink. There we go. Everybody has access. And I'm going to mark where I am with a circle because my X was ugly. So I live in Vancouver, Washington, which is right here. I have lived here for 2 months. That's where I live. I am not seeing any users in here. Is anybody having trouble getting into the Jamboard? Ah, there they are. It was just slow. Hello, someone's a unicorn. Congratulations. Perfect. Yes.
So
See,
I have to admit, I mean, I think I'm in the right place in the state, but I don't really know. Like, That's one of my terrible things is my quantitative. I'm trying to be Greenbrier and I am that weird green line. So I'm hoping I'm kind of close.
I think you're in Cabot over here.
Okay,
Cabot
so
would be
I
like
need to move over a little.
yeah,
Okay,
but
right?
it's fine. It would have been a better choice for me to put some landmarks on here, to put maybe Little Rock and maybe Texarkana and maybe, what's this? Lake something. Like Village. There
I
you go.
left it. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think this is fun. I like it.
Thanks.
I think kids would enjoy it. And that's a great visual. I was trying to figure out where Washington and Portland kind of were. So I love where your dot is. It helps me better see.
Oh, right there. I'm just a 20-minute drive from PDX Airport. Yes, and it's gorgeous, folks. If you have not been to the Cascades, do it. It's amazing. It's so good. Oh, I'm seeing Plummerville. I know where Plummerville is. I used to teach for Virtual Arkansas. Plummerville, I'm going to estimate is probably, I'm going to do the highlighter. Oh, you're already green. I'm going to do yellow. Plummerville is probably here.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm at Archford. That's all I know.
Yes. I taught Art 1 for Virtual Arkansas in the 2020-2021 school year.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good time. And I designed the 7th, 8th grade theater class that's currently being taught. Okay, so we've got just kind of a view of where folks are. Generally Central Arkansas, and then up here in the northeast corner, and then me, a 5-day drive away. So let's go back here and let's put UDL in context. So I'm going to show you some pictures you've probably seen before, but they're just perfect. And it's this. Have you seen a picture like this before? Yes. So we're not going to beat this over the head because you've seen it. It's just such a good illustration. This is what we deal with our students every single day. Some students have 3 boxes. Some have 1. Some students are standing in a hole and they're all trying to watch the same baseball game, right? So this is equality, right? Everybody's given 1 box. Everybody gets 1 box, but there are barriers in this situation. What barriers exist in the situation? How would you solve them? You can either type your answer in the chat, think your answer in your head, speak your answer out loud. Starly, I think you got Joan Sparrow. Close enough. And Tracy, I visited Clinton High School last fall and loved it. I really loved being there. It was when they were getting ready to put on Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Yes, and it was way fun. Yes, good. Oh, Melissa. Yes, you're right there with me. Yeah. So you see some of those. We see that even though everyone has the same support, they still aren't all able to see it and aren't all able to see it at the same level, right? We could give more boxes to the shorter kid. Certainly we could. That would look like this, right? Yeah, now everybody can see it. Everybody's chin is at the top of the fence, but there's still barriers. What barriers do you see here? Melissa, you got it. The fence is a barrier to begin with. We kind of take for granted that some of our systems in place have to be in place, but they don't. They don't. We're used to seeing the fence there, but we could just take the fence away. That's what UDL tries to teach, or not tries to teach, but tries to accomplish. So we have another prompt on the Jamboard on slide 2. Let me pull that up. I have confused my poor. Arkansas has grown. So on this slide, please, and notice you can get to it by clicking these arrows up here. You'll just go to slide 2, name a barrier any barrier that your students face. You can do that in multiple ways. You can use a text box here and you can type. That's pretty. You can use a sticky note and you can type on it and then click save and it'll place it on the board for you. You can also just write it in, but odds are good that it's going to look ugly. So up to you. One barrier that your students face. Yeah, slow internet connections in rural areas. There's lots of rural area in Arkansas. Language, absolutely. And not just foreign or world language or language of origin that's not English, but think about other forms of language. Think about African-American vernacular, right? A Black student speaking an African-American vernacular is speaking a solid linguistic language, but the impression of that language upon, say, a 50-year-old middle-class white woman is going to be a lot different. So language has many, many, many layers there. Yes, mental health, food insecurity, absolutely. All of these things are major, major issues, especially in southern states, everywhere, of course. Home life is not as easy as others, absolutely. You know that you have some students, if not you directly, then some of your colleagues have students that are homeless, have students that are transient, that sleep on a grandmother's couch or that share one bedroom with 7 people. And you don't know necessarily who those students are. So all the, yes, trauma and collective trauma. I mean, look at what we're coming out of. The world is in trauma right now. All of these are there. Lack of resources to fully participate. I mean, you know, a teacher who gets upset when students don't have pencils and kind of throws a fit about it. There's a reason that they don't have a pencil, and it's not because they're trying to make you mad. Generally, there's always one kid. Okay, so let's head back. Thank you for your input on that. I wanted to show you this video. Now, this video is terrible quality. And when we're talking about accessibility online, you only want to use videos and images of high quality, not fuzzy things. However, this is a video from 2009 that the publishing company has tried to suppress. I don't know that for sure, but I get the impression that they don't want people to see it. So this is like a copy of a copy. So I apologize for the graininess. Let's take a look at this video. It is by Autism Speaks. It is from 2009. And as we watch, I want you to think about the assumptions that are being made in this video. Can you hear?
Autism. I'm visible in your children, but if I can help it, I am invisible to you until it's too late. I know where you live, and guess what? I live there too. I hover around all of you. I know no color barrier, no religion, no morality, no currency. I speak your language fluently, and with every voice I take away, I acquire yet another language. I work very quickly. I work faster than pediatric AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And if you are happily married, I will make sure that your marriage fails. Your money will fall into my hands, and I will bankrupt you for my own self-gain. I don't sleep, so I make sure you don't either. I will make it virtually impossible for your family to easily attend the temple, birthday party, a public park, without a struggle, without embarrassment, without pain. You have no cure for me. Your scientists don't have the resources, and I relish their desperation. Your neighbors are happier to pretend that I don't exist, of course, until it's their child. I am autism. I have no interest in right or wrong. I derive great pleasure out of your loneliness. I will fight to take away your hope. I will plot to rob you of your children and your dreams. I will make sure that every day you wake up, you will cry, wondering who will take care of my child after I die. And
okay, I'm going to pause it there because that's enough. Now, the second half of the video is a little bit more hopeful. Parents of children on the spectrum come on and the voiceover says, we're going to fight you, autism. So the second half is more hopeful, but still, we're going to fight you, autism. So what assumptions are being made in this video from 2009? You can think your answer in your head. You can type it in the chat. You can unmute and speak your answer out loud. Yeah, it's a problem to be fixed. Autism will cause divorce. It actually says that. If you are married, I will make sure that you're not. What? Yeah, lots of boys, very, very few girls, which kind of sits in there in 2009, right? Sits in with what they used to know about autism. One finding, I couldn't cite a study, I'm sorry, but I have heard that females are diagnosed with autism later in life because females have better coping mechanisms with social situations. That's what I've heard. Again, can't cite that, so take it with a grain of salt, please. Yeah, Starly, there's nothing good about autism. That's kind of, yeah, that it's hopeless, that it's something to be feared. That's right. The tone of this video, is a horror movie, right? Like the music was like the music from a horror movie trailer. Yeah, it's something to be scared of, and it's something to fight against. I have taught Arkansas Governor's School for the previous 2 summers. And in Arkansas Governor's School, I teach Area 3. I taught Area 3, which is inter and intrapersonal connection and social change. At the very end of Governor's School, the last week of 4, those students develop a social change project. It could be anything. Any social issue they see that they would like to propose a solution to, they propose a solution in whatever way they want. So I had a student. Yes. Yeah, don't worry, Tracy, we get it. I had a student at Governor's School 2 years ago named Sage. I asked for his permission to use his project in contrast to this video. His social change project was, click that away, was in response to this 2009 video. Sage is on the spectrum, and he wanted to remake a video that places his perspective of autism out there for others to see. I will let Sage tell you about the rest of it himself.
Hello, my name is Sage Carpenter, and this is my pitch for the AGS Social Change Project. For my project, I chose to make sort of a PSA commercial, whatever you really want to call it, based on a infomercial put out by Autism Speaks, the largest autism related nonprofit in America. And they put out this infomercial in 2009. And basically the message of the commercial was that autism is something to be feared, something to be defeated. They portrayed it almost like a monster. And as someone on the autism spectrum myself, that bothers me a bit. So I decided to make my own version of the commercial that puts a more accurate and positive spin on the whole idea. So it depicts autism in a more positive light, and I'm quite proud of it. I put together stock footage to make sort of a short commercial, and I got 3 people to do voiceover, 2 of which are voice actors, and I'm proud of it, and it's I'm hoping that I'm hoping you like it. So, thank you.
I am very proud of it too. One of his voice actors is actually a friend. You're welcome, Starly. One of his voice actors is a friend of mine who is a caretaker for his adult brother who is on the spectrum. Okay, so let's see what Sage did. I'm super proud of this.
Hello.
Autism isn't a disease. Autism isn't a thing to fear. We are autism. We are your child, your spouse, your parent, your coworker, your boss,
Your religious leader,
Your doctor.
your teacher.
your best friend. We are a community that protects and supports. We are autism. We define ourselves, and we defy limitations.
We defy limitations.
And we defy limitations.
We are autism, and we speak for ourselves.
Isn't that fabulous? So another question that you can think in your mind, that you can speak, or that you can type in chat. How did Sage address those assumptions of the past? How did he change that paradigm or that way of thinking about autism? I know. I heart emoji as well. I was so proud. I cried. Yes.
I saw
Yes.
when you shared it, when we were teaching our class, I guess it was last year. I
Yes.
tear up every time and I
Yeah.
love it.
I'm so proud of him.
Mhm.
I'm so proud of him. Me too. Yes, the kids are happy because they're kids. Autism is not a monster. Kids who are on the spectrum can be happy kids. They can be unhappy kids. They can be difficult kids. They're kids, right? Like every kid is a kid. Lots of diverse examples. Exactly. They are humans living human lives in a community that seeks to support and understand them rather than fear, right? Seeking to understand is the important thing, not being right 100% of the time, just seeking to understand. Yeah. He presented them as people first. That, yes, I couldn't say it better myself. Okay, so let's talk about what UDL actually is. You have probably heard of it. UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning. UDL is a framework of suggestions and adaptable best practices to optimize learning for all people, based on scientific insights into how human beings learn, right? It's based on cognitive science. The key aspects of the framework include authentic engagement, accessibility and empathy, student voice, student choice, goal setting, and reflection. So let's put that into better words. This is what UDL means to me. So the definition is buzzwordy and academic, but here's what it really is. UDL is just learning to see the world through other people's eyes to increase belonging and provide more meaningful experiences to your students and to you. UDL is validating as a teacher. It lets you be creative and it lets you connect with your students, especially the ones that are hard to connect with. This is what UDL is to me. Now, I said here, learning to see the world through other people's eyes. But when I say learning to see the world through other people's eyes, I don't actually mean that. That is an idiom. That is a metaphor. This is a scan of my brain. I included this because I have reduced vision. I have a giant blind spot in the center of my vision right here, and I do not have peripheral vision. My peripherals begin about, hold on, here, and normal is about here. So I do not have full vision, but you wouldn't be able to tell that by looking at me at all. I have a brain condition that caused optic nerve atrophy, and when my optic nerves atrophied, then I had that permanent vision loss. And working in technical theater, I work in the dark a lot. And guys, I'm a visual artist. So I went blind briefly. My vision came back. I saw double for a while. That was awful. That was worse than being blind. And I still have reduced vision. I do have an implant. That's what this line is in my brain right here. I do have an implant in my brain that controls my intracranial pressure and keeps me alive and able to see even with the reductions that I have. So I included this for a couple of reasons. A lot of your students are contending with barriers that you have no idea exist. You have no idea they exist because they're not in an IEP, because their parents don't know that they even have the barrier to begin with. And if they do know they have the barrier, they don't know to request an IEP or a 504. They don't know that. They don't speak the language of education because they're not educators themselves. They don't know. And because of that, you probably don't know. I had a student once who had a terrible reputation. I actually wrote her into the class that Dr. Shaw mentioned earlier when we talked about student profiles. I wrote her into the class because she had a bad reputation for being mean. She was stank-faced. She would look at everybody like she hated you. She would lower her eyebrows and just give you the meanest mug ever. I asked her one day if she could see. Nobody had ever asked her if she could see. So she started making that face because she was just trying to squint and see things. But then it became a habit. It became this like vicious cycle of people think that I'm giving them stank face. So then she was squinting to see, but started having an attitude because people expected her to have an attitude. If you expect someone to have an attitude, they're going to give you an attitude. But when we got her a pair of glasses, it was like a new kid. She still had an attitude sometimes. I mean, she was a teenager, but she just couldn't see. There are a lot of things out there that we just don't know to look for. We just don't know. And UDL is about seeking out that knowledge to know more in the future. It's not about knowing everything right away, but it's about opening yourself up to perspectives that aren't yours, right? What if we have a student who was born without vision? We would probably know that when they came to us, but maybe only the first day of school. We wouldn't necessarily know it in advance. What if we have a student who is an amputee? What if they only have one hand? What if they don't have any hands? How are they going to complete your coursework if they don't have any hands? We imagine that the world that we see and the body that we see the world from is similar, at least, to everyone else's. But that's not true. And you just can't know it by looking at other people. Okay, so let's talk now about the 3 guidelines. There are 3 guidelines in UDL. Oh, Julie says her daughter's in a wheelchair right now because she broke her leg. Yeah, and the experience is eye-opening. We're going to talk about that. Thank you for sharing that. I have an example in a second. So the 3 guidelines are providing multiple means. That's a phrase you'll hear over and over. Multiple means, multiple means. The first is engagement. The second is representation. And the third is action and expression. We're going to talk about each individually. But for now, multiple means of engagement is the why of learning. It is convincing students that what they are learning is worth learning and that they should be persistent in learning it. It aims to recruit authentic student interest, encourage persistence and sustained effort, and teach self-regulation strategies, because we want students who are purposeful and we want students who are motivated. The next one is representation. That's the what of learning. And it considers how students will physically, cognitively, and emotionally perceive and comprehend the information you're giving them with a variety of supports to be able to do so. Because we want students who are resourceful and knowledgeable. Next, last is action and expression, which is the how. How are they going to learn and express what they've learned? That is choice. UDL emphasizes choice in physical action, in assistive technologies like our live transcription down here, for example, in communication, assessment, and the goal achievement process, because we want students who are strategic in what they're doing and who are goal oriented, micro goals and macro goals. So with that, I wanted to touch on these buzzwords. I just hosted through Washington State University, my current employer, a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference for all state agencies of Washington State. So we've heard DEI a lot lately, which is great. I love that we're hearing about it a lot lately. So UDL and DEI, they're the same thing. It's just that UDL is specifically targeted towards teaching, instruction, and learning. But it is absolutely part of this DEI spectrum. So diversity is similar to a buzzword in UDL that you will hear, variability. Variability is what it sounds like. It is all the differences in human beings. And that's a synonym for diversity, right? It exists without us doing anything. When you go into any context, even if it's just say you and your partner, there's diversity there, right? It may not be the diversity that people are addressing at any given point, but there is diversity. Even if it's an introvert and an extrovert, that's diversity, right? That is variability. Next is equity, right? DEI and equity. In UDL, that is equivalent to access. Every student in the United States has access to education because it is guaranteed in our rights, right? Every American is guaranteed the right to a free and adequate education, right? That's just access. But again, access is not necessarily equal. Inclusion is the last in DEI, and that is engagement, right? So when we include others, we are engaging them in what we're doing, right? However, if you haven't heard of a new word related to DEI, you will shortly, and that's belonging. Belonging is really the goal of all of this. When we include someone in inclusion, we're inviting them into the space, which is of course important. But when we create belonging for someone, we're not just inviting them into the space, we are designing the space to be equally theirs. The end. Belonging is really what we're searching for here. We want the space from the ground up to be everyone's, not just the people that we invite in. That gives us ownership if we're inviting them in. No, make it theirs to begin with. Ta-da! So belonging means making space for variable needs and perspectives from the ground up, not looking back on it, but from the very, very, very beginning. Now, this is one of the central tenets of UDL. Oh, I've covered my slides. Oh my goodness. Okay, details that are necessary for some folks are frequently beneficial to folks outside of that intended population. I wanted to say details that are necessary for some are beneficial to all, but working in absolutes right there just invites conflict. So details that are necessary for some are frequently beneficial to all. For example, in the chat, or you can say it out loud, who benefits from automatic doors? Someone with their hands full. Yes, which is probably not the first person that you think of. Anyone else? Who benefits from automatic doors? Mhm. Someone who is handicapped or has a disability. I've got a few examples for you here on the next slide. Who benefits from automatic doors? Two categories of people: those who need it and those who prefer it, right? Those who need it would be Julie's daughter right now, someone in a wheelchair, right? Folks without the use of their hands. Remember I said, what if we have a student who doesn't have hands? That exists. Folks with weak immune systems, especially in COVID, right? I don't want to touch a door ever again, actually. I don't want to. And sentient toys that try to break into a toy store. They need it. Those who prefer it, folks carrying a load, folks pushing a stroller, folks who just think it's nifty. Sometimes it's just fun to see that door open up. It just is. And the folks who pay the electric bill. If the door closes after someone opens it, then the person paying the electric bill is not going to have to pay quite as high of a bill. Yes. So there are two categories: people who need it, people who prefer it. So I'm going to ask you to do another question on the Jamboard. Who benefits from Spanish language instructional materials? On the Jamboard, that's on slide 3 up here. You can use the text box. You can use a sticky. You can use the pin feature. You could even upload a photo if you wanted to. It is up to you. Who benefits from Spanish language instructional materials? Absolutely. Yes. English language learners who are Spanish speaking. Yes. So here's a challenge. Remember, we have two categories: those who need it, like a level 1 Spanish native speaker. How about those who prefer it? Yes, people who are interested in learning Spanish. What if you have a gifted and talented student that is in Spanish 3, right? And they are really passionate about it. They want to go study Spanish in college. What if you have one of those students? If you have Spanish language instructional materials, they could practice their reading skills in your class for something that they're passionate about in an outside class, right? Somebody who prefers it. Good. Okay, let's head back. Thank you for your answers. So I'm just going to skip this. Now, let's talk about these 3 guidelines in a little bit more detail. We're going to start with multiple means of engagement. So multiple means of engagement has a couple of aspects within it, and I will link for you the full framework so you can refer to it here at the end. So the first thing you want to do in multiple means of engagement is recruit interest. There are 3 aspects to that. That is optimizing individual choice and autonomy, one of my favorite words, optimizing relevance, value, and authenticity, and minimizing threats and distractions. We've heard about minimizing threats and distractions a lot lately, which is wonderful. So a couple of practical tips. Establish and practice your routines and procedures. If you have read The First Days of School by Harry Wong, that man knows his business. I mean, truly, because establishing and practicing those procedures, that is what creates a space of safety and predictability in a good way that allows that extra emotional energy to be diverted towards actual learning and socializing, which of course is very important. Foster an environment of belonging and safety. Be aware of sensory stimulation and cognitive load. For example, a lot of gifted and talented students, I'm a gifted and talented specialist too. A lot of gifted and talented students have what are called hypersensitivities. They may not be on the spectrum of autism, but they may have a hypersensitivity to sound or to smell. If you have an air freshener in your room, That can be dangerous for a student who's allergic to it, but it can be distracting for a student who is just sensitive to it. So thinking about that sensory stimulation and what you're doing to certain students. If you're playing music while students are working, that could be a really good thing for some, but is there an option for other students to opt out of hearing that? Do they need quiet? Involve learners in the design of activities and tasks. Ask your kids what they want to do. Yeah, I mean, do that. It doesn't mean you have to do it exactly the way they say, but it can be really helpful. Plan for reward or recognition and make that friendly to both introverts and extroverts. If you publicly praise an introvert, you may be achieving exactly the opposite of what you're wanting to achieve. Leverage your students' interests and backgrounds. Include your actual human students in your class, and use problem and project-based learning. The next one for multiple means of engagement is sustaining effort and persistence. 4 points here. Heighten the salience of goals and objectives, make them matter and make them apparent. Then vary demands and resources to optimize challenges. You want the level to be appropriate, not too hard, not too easy, and to have a variety of choices that are a little easier or a little harder. 3, foster collaboration and community. And 4, increase mastery-oriented feedback. Feedback's very important. So a couple of tips. Frequently identify objectives, both micro objectives and macro objectives. Discuss the standard that you're teaching and learning. You can give the student the actual word for word standard that the state has required, and you can also translate it into student-friendly language because some of those standards are a mouthful. The fine arts standards are quite good, just saying. Then have students frequently self-assess. You can use proficiency scales for that, and that is super helpful. It really is. You can provide them to your students, or you can have students self-design them. And create class culture. I highly recommend branding your classroom. In the online teaching program at UCA with Dr. Shaw, I taught the production of media class, and I forced all of my graduate students to brand their classroom, come up with a color, a logo, a slogan, brand your classroom. There's a reason that people are so passionate about sports teams. You can kind of emulate that. Of course, it won't be as crazy as sports teams, but if you have a brand for your classroom, then your students are going to seek out that affiliation for the most part. Brand it and teach students how to seek out help. The last aspect of multiple means of engagement is self-regulation. Promote expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation, which I know is easier said than done. Facilitate personal coping skills and strategies, and develop self-assessment and reflection. So here, you're going to want to incorporate SEL, social emotional learning. That does not have to be a curriculum that you adopt. It can simply be starting class by saying, I am glad you're here and you are safe in this space with me. It can be that simple. Tell your students how you feel about them. Truly, there's no need to stay a step backwards. There's not. There's just not. Teach them how to manage frustration, how to seek support, and how to develop a growth mindset. If you focus in on those 3 things, you're going to have much more motivated, confident, and calm learners in your classroom. Provide models of appropriate actions and strategies. Show them what to do in certain situations. Teach them when they react like children do to certain negative stimuli. Make space for them. Say, hey, I understand why you acted that way. Or if you don't understand why they acted that way, ask them, hey, why did you react that way? Okay, I get it. What if you tried this instead? Right? Make space for them. Lean on real life situations that your students experience, not that you experience. If you begin school by asking students to tell their elbow partner about what they did this summer, you're probably looking at the world through your perspective only. A lot of your students spent the summer surviving. They didn't go to Disney World. They did not go to a petting zoo. They did not even go to a park. They don't have anything to say when you ask that question. Think about other perspectives so that you can lean on their experiences and not your own experiences. Now, that is hard. It is hard because you were born in your body. You were born with your metaphorical eyes. It's hard and it takes practice. And you should never, never, never fault yourself for seeing the world from your perspective. Your perspective is equally valid as any other perspective. But start trying to see other perspectives. That does not invalidate yours. It just creates a belonging for others. Last, provide or have students design a way to track forward progress. Proficiency scales, checklists, charts, graphic organizers. That's going to vary, of course, based on the grade level that you teach. With babies, with kindergartners, you may have just a picture scale that they can point at. With upper level seniors, they can develop their own. You're gonna have to show them how, of course, but they can develop their own. And here is a quick start guide. I do have a printable handout for you here at the end that kind of condenses this quick start guide down so that you can actually check off if you would like. But here's the quick start. So if you're going to take away from multiple means of engagement, use these 4 points. This is a base, of course. There's more to dive into, but this is a good start. First, look at your class rules and procedures. Are they all of them focused on creating a safe, welcoming learning environment? Do you have superfluous rules that are there because you have an annoyance? That's okay. But instead of it being a rule, maybe it should be a procedure, right? Look at your rules. Are they all focused on your students and on safe, welcoming learning environments? Next, compare your student population to your lesson plans, and that's your student population now. I know you don't have a student population now unless you're teaching summer school, but your students right now, not last year's students, not 2 years ago, not from your first year, your students now. Are your examples and activities representative of those kids, the kids now, not last year's kids? Do they reflect your students' interests, backgrounds, and future goals? Do they reflect your students' ethnicities, languages? When you pull up an example photograph, is that example photograph of, for me, a white middle-class woman? Or is that example photograph a person, let's say a 14-year-old Indian boy, right? Think about what you're choosing and why you're choosing it. Plan a 5-minute SEL lesson once a week, just once a week, targeted to your students' current struggles or needs. I don't recommend adopting an SEL curriculum. Now, this is just my opinion. This is endorsed by me only, but SEL curriculums are great for looking for ideas, but SEL should be about your students now, not the imaginary students the curriculum was written for, but your students now, right? Find ideas, but then adapt them to your kids. And last, implement goal tracking and meaningful self-assessment and reflection. Consider ways to recognize or reward progress that is sensitive to privacy. Remember, I mentioned if you are publicly praising an introvert or a student with severe anxiety, you're doing the opposite of what you mean to do, right? So think about that student and how you're going to reward or recognize their progress. And oh my gosh, you've heard this 74 million times in the course of your career. Make positive calls home to parents. One of my personal rules of thumb is for every negative call I have to make, because of course we have to make them, I make 5 positives. There is nothing more satisfying than calling a mother of a mediocre student and saying, hey, and oh, I hate that I just said that, mediocre, a mediocre achieving student, let's say a mostly C, sometimes D student. Nothing better than calling that mama and saying, your daughter did a great job today, and she was kind to the people around her. That's it. That reaction from that mama is so validating. Make those calls. It will help with burnout. Honestly, if you're feeling burnt out, start making positive phone calls home to parents. That's the best thing for burnout, for me, at least. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? I haven't stopped for questions. I apologize for that.
I had a comment. I was just going to engagement. I have taught UDL for years. I am aware, but when you were going through engagement and your strategies and talking about classrooms, I realized for those who are still on the test evaluation,
Mhm.
if you do those things, your students will be on a 4 for self-monitoring, for not going nuts in your class, because your principal's looking for that, to see, can the kids self-monitor? And that was always one of the hardest things for students to show, because usually the teacher, was the one in charge, and they were in charge of the questions and in charge of everything. But if you get the kids really interested again in learning and also self-assessing and doing all of those things, it just, I made that connection, and I thought, well, good Lord, that only took 2 years.
It's all Danielson, right? And friends, just to be explicit about this, I'm not saying this is easy at all. It takes time, and UDL, well, first of all, I don't think there's a downside, but if I was going to say there's a downside, it's front loaded. It's going to take you considering it now and planning now so that you can implement it at the beginning of the school year. It's front loaded. It's work to get there, but that front loading, that extra work you do at the beginning, pays off in droves throughout the year. I mean, it really, really does. This next one, we talked about representation. This one's going to save you copious amounts of time on differentiating and making sure that you're doing everything that an IEP or a 504 says. It will save you gobs of time. At the same time, it will increase belonging for all of your students. Yeah, and that's more important, well, it's more important to me. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I am one of those people that will break myself throughout the school year. Dr. Shaw knows, she's seen my work. I will. I need the summer because I will break myself. I do not recommend that, and I don't want you to do that. But even for me, who will do too much in the school year, even for me, it's more important that my students feel a sense of belonging than I save time. It really is. Because, we've all heard that quote. I'm going to paraphrase it. That students won't remember everything you teach them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Guys, that's more important. It just is. It is. It's important to teach them. It's important to teach them how, but teaching them that they themselves are humans, that's what's going to end forever, period. They can learn anything they want at any point. They can, because you set them up to be confident and capable and to know that they belong in society. Okay, so any other questions? I'm happy to answer them. I like UDL. I don't know if you've noticed, I like it. Okay, so let's talk about multiple means of representation. Multiple means of representation is where we get to the nuts and bolts of UDL. It is the what of learning. So here we're thinking about those physical, cognitive, and emotional needs of our students and how we can provide a variety of supports for them. This is where a lot of the time is sunk because you're making sure that all of your instructional materials are accessible and that there are multiple options within them. So this does take some time, but it really is worth it. So the first in multiple means of representation, and remember, if you have a question or a comment or a complaint, or if you want to argue with me, you're very welcome to. You can always unmute and ask or argue, or you can type it in the chat at any point. Don't be shy. So first, you want to provide options for perception. First, you want to offer ways of customizing the display of information. Notice at the beginning, I have the slides presentation up on Zoom, but I also gave you the direct link, because with the direct link, if you wanted to use Google Translate and translate the whole dang thing into Urdu, you could, right? Or if you wanted to use a screen reader, you could. Or if you're sick of hearing me talk about this slide and you just want to move on to the next one, you can, right? So I've given you multiple ways of customizing that information. Next, offer alternatives for auditory information. I'm speaking to you right now, but I don't know that everybody has full auditory ability. One person in here may not have any hearing at all. One person may be deaf in one ear. One person may be having to balance their baby right now, and the baby is crying, and so he or she or they cannot hear what I'm trying to say. So I turned on live transcription. Live transcription is not perfect, but it's a good option to have available, right? Next, offer alternatives for visual information. Like me with reduced vision, some folks can't see. Some folks can't see at all, and some folks can't see a little bit. So you want to have alternatives for that visual information. So examples, provide transcripts of recordings, songs, podcasts, etc. They're very easy to generate, by the way. Very easy to generate. So provide transcripts. Use closed captioning on videos, right? Turn it on. Some folks are going to complain and say, oh, but the words are distracting. Okay, learn how to manage your distractions, babe. That's how it works. If you didn't watch Parasite, which won the Academy Award for Best Film because it was in a foreign language, then Korean, isn't it? Because it has captions at the bottom, you'll watch Parasite. Like, stop it. Stop being a big baby. I shouldn't do that. That's mean. Expand your horizons and go watch a foreign language film. Do it. You'll be surprised how much you like it, especially Parasite. Parasite's real good. Use live transcription, like I said. Use alt text for digital images. I can show you here at the end how to add alt text. If you have a student who is blind, then they can use a screen reader. The screen reader will tell them what that picture is because they can't see it. It's really very easy to do, and it increases belonging for so many people. And last, provide information in adaptable format. So for example, use a Word or Google Doc instead of or in addition to a PDF. Some screen readers cannot read PDFs or can't read them well. Show students how to speed up, slow down, and pause media. If you listen to podcasts or you listen to audiobooks, you've probably seen that little dial. I like to listen to audiobooks on 1.25 speed. One speed is too slow, right? But for some students, if they're listening to an audiobook while reading and they're a low-level reader, you may want to show them how to slow it down to 0.75, because then they can absorb the sound and read the word at the same time. So show them how to speed up, slow down, and pause. Don't assume they know.
Shelley, I was going to say, so when I was still in the school library, one of the we offered audiobooks. They were on little playaways, and they were great. The kid had to have their own little headphones, so we'd find the little earbuds. We'd also check out a copy of the book. But one thing I realized I never did, I guess I assumed a 6th grader or a 7th grader would know how to use those. I never really took the time and showed them, but then I also realized we got Kindle Fires and we downloaded a lot of Spanish language books on there. We were using it for our ELL kids. We also had regular, like the Hunger Games, some of the more popular fiction at the time. But I never thought to show my SPED or my ELL kids how to highlight a word or to look at it. Like, I didn't take that time because I assumed these are tech natives and they know everything. And I had a kid turn it back in and he was like, well, I couldn't, he said something. And I said, all you had to do was click on that and it would have defined the word linoleum and he was like, I didn't know it did that. And I thought, well, good heavens.
Yeah,
Where
they are tech natives, but they're tech natives for TikTok, right? They're tech natives for an iPhone.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean that they know every program. They'll learn it quickly. They will,
yeah.
but they still have to learn it.
I should have done you did a really good job with our little tiny, like even just our students coming into the online teaching academy. They're all teachers. Well, we assumed they knew how to navigate Blackboard or just logging into UCA. And so Shelley did a great job of doing these tiny tech tips. Here's how to even find your UCA ID. And I think about stuff that I didn't do for my students, and I could have done these tiny little tidbits and they could have accessed it, had the visual. I could have closed caption, so the ones that wanted to read the transcript instead could have.
This is true. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, Dr. Shaw.
Go ahead. So
This
I
is
was
true, but
thinking about
remember, learning something new never invalidates what you've done in the past. Never. So saying could have or should have,
Yeah,
no. Instead, just say what I'm going to do in the future. Could have and should have is not a thing in UDL. It doesn't exist. Learning something new never invalidates what you've done ever, because you as an educator have done amazing things. Dr. Shaw, I did not even know, I had not even heard of UDL until I took your class. And I love it. And I'm teaching a seminar right now.
I know.
So,
So I am doing good things. You're right. And I appreciate the positivity, because I always think, oh, but yes.
Yes.
I will do that.
Every educator that is an educator, right, is valid and is important and has done amazing things. Amazing. But you can always add more, but never, ever feel inadequate in anything you've done in the past. Never. Okay, let's move on. So next, and please excuse me for one moment, I have an elderly dog who has been scratching at the door for 20 minutes. Excuse me for just a moment while I am letting the poor dog out. Would you please read 1 through 5 on this slide? Okay, I apologize for that. I hope I gave you enough time to read 1 through 5. So in 1 through 5, I won't reread them to you since I had you read them yourself. I'm going to stop share for a moment and then reshare because I messed up my screen. There. So here are things you can do to achieve 1 through 5 about language and symbols. Pre-teach vocabulary and symbols. Symbols are especially important in math, of course, but not just math. In dance, for example, in dance, we show students how to notate their dance moves. We want to show them what that notation means. In theater, we do the same thing. In a script, we actually map out how the actors are moving around the stage in any given scene. So teach them what the symbols mean and teach them the vocabulary. And how to find meaning independently when encountering the unknown. Just like Dr. Shaw said, if a student encounters linoleum and doesn't know what it means, then we need to show she, him, or they how to find that meaning. Demonstrate how complex words and structures are composed of simpler, smaller pieces. By the way, UDL is not new. It's a framework for what you've already been doing in best practices, like Dr. Shaw mentioned with TESS, which is just Danielson, right? That's just Danielson. It's the same thing, because when we say demonstrate how complex words and structures are composed of simpler, smaller pieces, that's a huge part of the science of reading that you've all been trained on. I mean, that's science of reading right there. This is not new stuff. Use plain language. There's no need to be fancy pants. You don't need to be fancy. Use plain language. Use concise language. Be accessible in your own speaking. Make use of multiple formats. Use videos, audiobooks, podcasts, drawings, illustrations, globes. Use as many formats as you can get your hands on without being overwhelming. And this is a shameless plug, seek arts infusion. Arts infused classrooms have better learning, period. They do. Seek arts infusion. Don't force students to be artists. Don't tell students that they have to be creative, because when you do, they rebel, right? Just slide it in there, quietly. And provide translations. Provide translations for first languages, including pronunciations. A lot of our students whose native language is not English really have no idea how to pronounce things, especially if we're looking at Greek mythology. I don't know how to pronounce Euripides if I'm just looking at it. Moving up to Washington, there are a lot of words here that I had no idea how to pronounce. Like, try this one, for example. Or this one. Right? Anyone want to give a shot to one of those? The second one's more well known.
Puyallup.
How did you do that? Yes.
My parents lived in Stillicum.
Nice.
I had
It's not
no
far.
idea what that was.
Right? It's Puyallup, which is the name of an indigenous community here. And a river and a couple of other things. And the second one there is more well known, but it's really hard because, I learned it through seeing it, right? Instead of hearing it. Anybody want to give that one a shot?
Well, if looking at it, you would think it was just Willamette.
Exactly. That's
But
exactly what I
obviously
thought.
it's not.
Nope. It's Willamette.
Willamette.
Yeah. Or Little Rock folks. How about transpose the A and the M. Or
No. Mhm.
or
Mhm.
right? So a lot of our English language learning students, or who speak a different language natively, it's not that they don't understand the language. They're starting to understand. They may be a level 3 and you don't even realize it because they're scared to speak, right? They're scared to speak it because they've been ridiculed for pronouncing Circe, because it says Circe. It says Circe. It does not say Circe, right? But they've been ridiculed for that anyway. So teaching them how to pronounce it, or even just pronouncing it for them once, right? That could actually accelerate a student's ability to speak back to you in English. They may know it. They're just scared to say it. I'm kind of scared to say Willamette. I'm scared to say, I'm still that. So that's a suburb of Portland. Is it Tigard? I think it's Tigard, but is it Tigard? I don't know. I'm scared to say it. So teach pronunciation. Next is comprehension. Comprehension is within multiple means of representation. You want to activate or supply background knowledge regularly and frequently. You want to highlight patterns, critical features, big ideas, and relationships. Show the patterns. You want to guide information processing and visualization. And you want to maximize transfer and generalization, which is applying one schema or structure of thinking to a new novel environment. So, examples. Anchor new learning in context of prior learning, right? You can say things like, remember yesterday when we talked about blank, or last week, Billy Joe said that blank, right? If you can include the students in that and name them, especially students who want to be recognized verbally, only students who want to be recognized verbally, that helps. Use graphic organizers to demonstrate relationships. If you're teaching Romeo and Juliet, then have a map that shows the family tree of the Capulets and a family tree of the Montagues and how they relate to each other. If you're a theater teacher like myself, then you could have that map, and you could have a map from West Side Story and show how the characters are related to each other. Same thing for the Lion King and Hamlet, right? You can make these connections between highbrow and lowbrow media. You can highlight how students can apply learned skills to solve unfamiliar problems. If you have 12 times 7, That is way more intimidating than saying 10 times 7 plus 2 times 7. You can find the answer in your head to 10 times 7 plus 2 times 7 quicker than 12 times 7, right? But it's the same thing. Allow and encourage alternate methods of problem solving. Let your students be innovative and let them respectfully, of course, argue with you a little bit. If they say, well, I don't want to do it that way, I want to do it this way. If it achieves the same standard, if it achieves the same learning, why not let them do it the way that they proposed? And then when they say that, and they may come at you and say that in a snarky way, we know kids, right? They may do that. I don't like this. I want to do that. You can say, that is a fantastic idea, and I cannot wait to see what you do with it. That will disarm their snark real fast, right? It puts their money where their mouth is. Chunk information into smaller elements, gradual release. We've all heard that. Encourage relevant, seemingly off the wall connections that students may make, and chase the rabbit holes, right? Sometimes they make weird connections. You've experienced that before, right? They'll talk about something their grandmother did. Awesome. Yes, that's a yes. Make those connections, encourage them, and look for the little nuggets of connection in there. Here's our quick start guide. So 5 things here. Check your digital and print materials. This is the class that Dr. Shaw and I have taught at UCA. This is what a lot of the class deals with. Check your digital and print materials. Could someone with no vision or hearing reap the full benefit of them? Or will a blind student or a deaf student not be able to access the learning because of the way it's being presented? How about someone who speaks no English? Can they access the full benefit of your materials? Someone without full control of 2 hands and 2 legs? Someone who is neurodivergent? Someone who's an introvert? Someone who just prefers one thing over another? Check your digital and print materials. Make sure that they're accessible by everyone. Do any lessons or assignments have only one way to acquire new knowledge? If you say, hey, go home and read chapter 4, that's just one way, right? How about read chapter 4 or listen to the audio version of it, or work through this worksheet, or outline chapter 4. Give them some options. Could you make an audio or video version available? How about a game? Another shameless arts infusion plug, a song, a drama, a dance, a work of art, right? Next, pepper in references to previous lessons. Pepper them in, be Salt Bay, and put them everywhere. Phrases like Billy said blank when we were discussing blank is a double whammy because it connects to prior learning and it provides that recognition and modeling opportunities because Billy is now a model to his peers. And Billy, hopefully, is going to love that. Next, implement a 1-minute vocab and symbols teaser at the beginning of each lesson. What you want to do, make it quick. But your goal is to make students kind of roll their eyes and be like, I know, right? But one sentence that explains the key vocabulary word can be crazy beneficial, even if you know they know it and they know it. Do it anyway. Next, examine your own habits. Are you making space for student innovation, even that which may seem bizarre? Even that which may not jive with your own methods and preferences. You may really love the way that you teach students to do a math problem, for example. That's only one example. This is not at all isolated to math. You may love that way, but there are other ways. There just are. There are other ways. And if a student wants to try another way, let them try another way. That's it. Any questions? Comments, concerns, debates? All right. So the third.
I think you're doing great. So yeah, I've enjoyed, and accessibility. Later, you'll show maybe a couple of the tools.
I had some resources, but I didn't go into it.
Okay.
because truly of our UDL class that's a semester long, half of it is about accessibility.
Right. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, if we just share, maybe just a few resources.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep. Can do. It's on the checklist too. Okay. So last is provide multiple means of action and expression. Remember, this is the how of learning. And this gets into a little bit about accessibility as well. So first is options for physical action. You want to vary the methods for response and navigation, and you want to optimize access to tools and assistive technologies. So tips: allow students to choose method of response. Can they write with a pen or pencil on paper? Can they type? Can they speak? Can they draw? When I have asked you to respond to me, I have said frequently, you can think the answer in your head, you can type it in the chat, you can unmute and speak, right? So give those options and give them proactively, so that a student doesn't raise their hand and ask, could I type this instead? Tell them up front that they can, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't ever raise their hand and ask if they can do it in an alternative way. That's absolutely encouraged, but give them a few options to begin with. Next, provide alternatives for physically interacting with materials. If you have a digital matching activity, for example, and they have to grab something and drag it with the mouse and then let it go, provide an alternative to that. Because what if you have a student who doesn't have hands, or you have a student who has broken their hand and it's in a cast and they can't maintain that click and drag? Think about alternatives that you could do that are more physically accessible to your students. And make assistive technology available to everybody, not just students who require it. Make it a buffet, right? It's a buffet and you can pick what you want from it. For example, a dedicated student artist, you have these in your classroom who just sit there and sketch the whole time and it looks like he, she, or they is not paying attention. Maybe they would benefit from text to speech. Maybe she can study for history, your history class, if you're a history teacher, while she's painting, right? Leverage that, because then she's going to respect and spend more time with your class than she would have otherwise.
Shelley,
Yes.
I was going to say that's a good case in point. I have discovered, like when I have to do research and I'm doing a literature review, I can find the research that ties into whatever my study is. But when I want to go and write the paper, for me, I just I get so overwhelmed that then I just try to avoid writing altogether. So I have found opening a Google Doc and doing the speech to text, I can speak so much better. My storytelling is so much better if I can do it that way rather than writing it on paper, and then I can go back later and edit. So I think that's something we don't always think about. We think, no, they have to do the writing, but I do believe that there is some, they do need that eye-hand coordination too. So I get that there has to be a balance. I don't know.
Yes.
I may have hijacked. Sorry.
No, that's perfect, because that's absolutely what I'm going for. I need to let in the elderly dog now. Excuse me, please. While I'm letting in the elderly dog, please read 1, 2, and 3. Excuse me for that. Her name is Massey. She's a mini schnauzer. So in expression and communication, we're talking about using multiple media, multiple tools, and building fluencies with graduated levels of support, right? So here, tips: use choices of multimedia, including text, speech, drawing, diagrams, comics, storyboards, design, film, dance, art, sculpture, everything, anything that's relevant or that's interesting to your students, use it. Allow things like spell checkers, calculators, scratch paper. The days of saying you can't rely on a calculator because you're not always going to have one, that's not true anymore. Yes, you do always have access to a calculator. Yes, you do. Your phone might run out of batteries, but the person next to you has one, right? Those days are over. They just are. Next, teach and use digital tools and web applications. Like we talked about, teach them first, don't assume they know them. Provide differentiated models, mentors, and supports, and provide ample, accessible, and personalized feedback, which is time consuming, but is very, very beneficial. The last aspect, the last part of our 3 pillars of UDL is providing options for executive functions. Guide appropriate goal setting, support planning and strategy development, facilitate managing information and resources, and enhance capacity for monitoring progress. This one in particular, my partner is a 34-year-old man, and he has ADHD. These 4 things in particular are incredibly helpful for students and adults like my partner who have ADHD. This is amazing. Post and frequently explain goals, objectives, and schedules. Provide guides for breaking long-term goals into manageable short-term objectives. Prompt students to show their work while embracing alternate methods of achieving mastery. Let them be innovative. Provide organizers, checklists, guides for note-taking, or have students develop them themselves. And show representations of progress, before and after photos, for example. I'm an art teacher, right? So here's what you drew last week, and here's what you drew today, and look at how much better you got, right? A portfolio is excellent for that, even if it's a portfolio for a more logic-based class for math. Look at how many of these algebraic equations you were able to solve correctly on your own last month, and look at how many you solved on your own this month. And quick start, 4 things: reevaluate your expectations for how students create their work. If you require students to only use a pen so that you can better read their work, couldn't you also allow typing? Couldn't you also allow speech to text with editing, like Dr. Shaw mentioned? Could students use a tablet to write on digital documents? Reassess your expectations and see if there are other ways of achieving what you want from your students without doing it just one way. 2, how are your goals communicated? Can you model how you arrived at your class goals? Can you show them, I knew I wanted to do this, so I decided we needed to do X, Y, Z first, right? Show them the overall goal and then how you decided you were going to get there. Could your students contribute to that process once they understand the model? Can you say, we need to learn how to identify adverbs by Thursday? What do we need to do to be able to identify adverbs? Okay, we need to define adverbs. We need to see examples and non-examples. We need to write our own examples, right? Let them decide, let them verbalize how they're going to achieve that goal. And take a critical look at who is benefiting from accommodations and which accommodations would be beneficial to all. Is there anything wrong with providing accommodations to someone who doesn't have an IEP or a 504 for them? Now, I don't mean by accommodations, I don't mean that we're trying to water down the learning. That is not what I mean. What I mean is the text to speech. I mean listening to an audiobook while reading the actual book. Does that hurt anybody? Does it really? Or do we think it might because we just feel like it might, right? Take a critical look. Who's benefiting and who could benefit? And compare your first lesson in a unit to the last. How will students clearly see their own progress from the beginning to the end? Any questions? So here's some resistance. When we talk about UDL, then we can have some resistance for someone who might say, we cannot possibly meet all needs in one class period, in one classroom, or in 1 year. That's true. Maybe not. Maybe not right away, right? But can we just shoot for meeting more of them? Even one more of them. I just gave you a lot of information. That doesn't mean you have to implement it all right now. That is not the case. Could you just add audiobook options to your students? Could you just consider students who may not be able to see and modify your instructional materials based on the idea that there may be somebody who can't see in your room? Pick one thing, just one thing. And that really does increase belonging. I'm going to skip the Jamboard here for the sake of time, but if you would like to contribute to slide 4, please go ahead and do so. It does ask for vulnerability. What is one thing that you could focus on to improve for upcoming instruction? What is one barrier that you can rip down for your kids? I don't expect you, nobody expects you to be able to rip down every single barrier. But what is one thing that you could do better to make your learning more accessible to your students? Again, it requests vulnerability, but answers are also anonymous. I'm skipping it, but do feel free to contribute. UDL is about continuous improvement. It is not about perfection, and it's not about instant gratification. Do a little. You don't have to do a lot. Do a little, because as you add a little, you will be shocked at how quickly accessibility and motivation, engagement, action, choices, student voice, you'll be shocked at how quickly that becomes second nature to you as an instructor. It's a growing pain at first, it is. But seriously, once you start it and practice it, it really becomes second nature. Okay, so I have a request for you. I have linked in a couple of examples here. I recently was hired for a new position. I'm going to be teaching visual art at Ridgefield High School here in Washington. Washington has an extremely strong union, and teaching positions in Washington are extremely competitive, especially in extracurriculars and the arts. So I went in for a 1-hour interview, then a 1-hour sample lesson with an actual classroom of kids in their actual art class, and then had a 1-hour unpack with the panel that interviewed me. It was intense. It was super intense. So I linked in the lesson I created for that, as well as my slides presentation and a playthrough Pear Deck, and the handout that I provided to those actual students in their actual class. Of course, I had been teaching UDL at this point for a little while. So it is a very UDL focused lesson. I would like for you to please explore these resources and identify a few details that reflect UDL planning, either on the Jamboard, since there's only a couple of us in here. Just do slide 5, ignore slides 6 through 9. That was in case we had multiple people or lots of people. So just slide 5. You can write it on the Jamboard. You can take written notes if you'd like. You can write it down in front of you. You can pull up a Google Doc, or you can chat with us. You can speak out loud. You can write down or type in the Zoom chat your conversation, or you can use any other format. And we were going to do breakout groups, but I think we'll just stay in this room so that we're all together, because there's just a handful of us. So please explore. Notice I've given you a couple of options here. The first link here is redacted. I took out all of the detailed UDL accommodations or UDL details that I put into the lesson plan. But the second one, if you want to take a quicker look, if you don't want to, hunt through it, then the second one actually has a section that says UDL considerations. You can read them for yourself if you'd like. Take a look at the slides presentation or the Pear Deck. If you look at the Pear Deck, I have set it for independent progress. So you're a student in the Pear Deck. At that case, you can see what the students saw. And a tip there, use the arrows in the bottom left corner to navigate it. Because when you first click on the Pear Deck, it's going to look like you should click the slides. Instead, click the arrows in the bottom left corner. And the student handout, you can access that as a PDF or I designed it in Google Slides, which is actually my favorite way to design documents, so that you can access either of those formats. So take a look, please. Just take about, well, let's say 10 minutes. Yeah, let's do 10 minutes. For about 10 minutes, take a look at these and try to find some of the details that we've talked about today. Try to find the multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. Yeah, be a detective. See what you can find. And if you have questions, want to make a comment, I am here and you're welcome to type in the chat or pop on and speak verbally. It is 1:40 here in the Pacific Northwest, and my stomach has just told me that I am hungry. I am here, but elderly dog needs to go again. It's the work from home challenges. You sweet girl. We've got about 5 more minutes in our perusal. If anybody has a comment or an observation, I would love to hear them.
Shelley, I had a question about, so Urdu, is that one of the native speakers up in Washington?
In that particular classroom, yes.
Okay.
So before, when I was offered the interview, they told me, they gave me the teachers, actually the chair, not even the teachers, the department chair's contact information, and said, if you have any questions about the classroom, let her know. And of course, being a UDL focused educator, I asked her about disabilities in the classroom. I asked her about specific languages that may need to be addressed. Spanish is not as common up here because obviously we're not as close to a Spanish speaking nation. It's still fairly common, of course, but not as common as it is in Arkansas. And she said, she came back and told me that there was one student who was on the spectrum. There was a student whose native language was Urdu, and he was about a level 2. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. I used Google Translate to translate all of those most important keywords. Since he's a level 2, I didn't want to give him everything, but I did want to give him everything he needed to be able to know what we were doing. He also had an elbow partner whose native language was also Urdu, but who was a level 4. So I kind of planned for that too. I have a friend whose native language is Urdu, who has lived here since he was 10, I think. And I sent him my translation and said, hey, edit for me, please. So his name is Nadeem, and he brushed it up for me. Because, Google Translate is great. It's a great start. But if you can have a native speaker go in and edit it, that's better. But Google Translate, if that's all you have, great. Use it. Yes.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. And I love the reflection you did of your own, how the lesson went, what you would change, because that is one of the things I remember as a first year teacher. I didn't keep track of anything I had done. So the next year rolled around and I thought, well, I'll just do what I did last year, because some of it worked. But then I thought, well, I don't really remember how this went. And so I started a calendar where I tracked how far we got. But you're right, to know which, like, not your class from 2 years ago, not your class, because just because it took my 4th period 15 minutes this year doesn't mean next year's 4th period.
Yes.
And
I love, I'm sorry, Dr. Shaw. I didn't mean to correct you. I love that idea of tracking it on a calendar, because that's a UDL strategy too, is having those systems of tracking and showing your progress. Yeah, that's great. And of course, there's if there's one thing to say for UDL, there's no one size fits all approach, of course. So tracking on a calendar may not be something that every student or every teacher needs to do, but it's a great option to have out there.
I think it would also be good to show our administrators who get in those mindsets. I know Conway was one. Oh, I'd set my timer, so our 10 minutes was up. I was just trying to help. But, sometimes our administrators, I know that they're getting pressure from above or from DESE, and so some districts, especially larger ones, I know Conway was one, they had the UBDs, and I called it the UB doing it, because, you're supposed to be on this page at this time on this day. Not that your kids were necessarily meeting that. You could have none of your kids meeting whatever goal object, and that was even in the library, but you were supposed to be doing the next thing. So I think maybe tracking on a calendar to have that evidence, that data, that this is where my kids are, and I need them to reach this benchmark before we can move on.
Yes, love that authentic learning. And of course, we are functioning within old systems, and we are at the mercy of what our administrators tell us to do, which can be frustrating. It can be empowering too, but it can be frustrating. But, you know, lockstepping, that benefits no one. That benefits no one at all. Not even us, because it does the opposite of what they want it to do. It will decrease test scores, because you're not authentically learning anything. Instead of authentically learning, let's be real pessimistic and say 30%. I would much rather my students get a 30% than a 2%. Okay, any other observations? Please feel free to post those in chat. I want to give you some resources, so I'm going to go ahead and jump forward, but you have access to this slides presentation. If you ever want to go back and peruse, you're more than welcome to. And one quick note, that lesson plan, UDL and myself and Dr. Shaw, we do not at all expect you to create lesson plans like that for every single lesson. That is not sustainable. I was selling myself in this lesson, right? It's like I was trying to get a job that was super competitive. This is not normal in terms of the length of a lesson plan. You do not have to do that. Give yourself some bullet points, put some thought power into how you're going to address all learner variability, and yeah, do some reflection. Doesn't even have to be every day. It's helpful if it is. But if you take 10 minutes out of your prep period on Friday only, use that for reflection, and that's good, right? A little is good. Okay, I wanted to add in a couple of things for families. Variability is present in all populations, including your students' adults. So provide multiple methods of families to communicate with you: phone, email, snail mail, Zoom, in-person conferencing. Don't just be accessible by one route. Consider all possible barriers for low-income families. We talked about this at the beginning. Some students have no pencil today because they got to eat dinner last night. Be patient and be kind. And this is a big one, normalize variability. For example, if you have Spanish-speaking families, send the bilingual version of your communications to everybody, not just the ones who you know need it. A lot of the world's hatred comes from a perceived lack of exposure. I say perceived lack of exposure because variability is everywhere around you. If you think to yourself, there is no one around me who speaks Spanish as a native language, you're wrong. If you think to yourself, there's no one around me who is gay, you are wrong. You're wrong, right? You think you have a lack of exposure, but you don't. There's variability everywhere. Normalize it. Notice in my lesson that I gave as an example, I didn't like make a show. I didn't come out and say, here's the Urdu translation so that every student knows that there's somebody in here who speaks Urdu. No, it was just there. It was just there. I didn't draw attention to it because the student who speaks and reads Urdu, he's going to read it. He's going to see it there. There just ain't no need to make a big show of it. It's just there. It normalizes it. And explain UDL to your students' adults. Encourage them to communicate their students' unique variability with you because it may not be on a 504 or an IEP, and to expect more options in activities and assessments than students may be used to. I also created this little printable check sheet for you. This is new, Dr. Shaw. 30 minutes before we started, I was like, I need to give them something that they can print. So this is new. But if you click on this document, it will allow you to make your own copy that you can edit. Remember, I said I really like creating documents in Google Slides. So it's a Google Slides document, but you can do it however you want. It's right here. You can print it. It's printable. I didn't make it cutesy and pretty because I wanted it to be good in a printer. So there's your checklist. I left some lines down there at the bottom for any notes you would like to take, but that's there. As you are lesson planning and syllabus planning for next year, if you just use even 2 or 3 of the checks on this list, you are going to be creating more belonging for your students and empowering yourself as an educator. It's overwhelming at first, I know. Don't try to do it all at once. Just do a little, and that's good. Okay, and I'm going to stop and reshare because I messed up my screen again. That's what you do. Next are those resources. And I would be happy to share more resources. If you have a targeted question or need targeted resources for something, I would love to send you something. But here are a couple of resources that could be helpful for you. Notice they're in multiple formats. I've given you websites, I've given you PDFs, I've given you printable and typable templates, I've given you a podcast. Use what you want and ignore what you don't want. But all of these are there and clickable for you on the direct access slides presentation. If you would like for me to email them to you directly, I would love to. Just shoot me an email. And you can do that at shellyhouse@gmail.com. And Dr. Shaw's email address is down there as well. You are very, very welcome to get in touch. And thank you to Slides Carnival for providing my template. Okay, we have just 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, any comments? Would you like anything? Anything at all? Do you want to tell me what your favorite color is? Mine is green. There's a cat in my lap right now. You can't see him, but he's been very insistent.
My favorite color is green as well. So just thought I would do that.
I mean, it's objectively
Julie,
the best color.
I do too. Julie Workman said she enjoyed this so much she didn't even need professional development. She may be reaching out to you from Arch Ford. So she wanted you to know she had to go to a grant writing something at 3:30. So she had popped off and gotten out of there for a minute.
No problem. She DM'd me in chat. I see.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes, I'll send her an email just to make sure that she has my contact information. No problem.
Perfect.
Well, folks, I am really pleased that you came. Thank you. There is another session of this. It'll be identical. So, I mean, come back if you want to, but don't come back and just be bored. But if you know another educator that would benefit from this information, please send them our way. And remember, you are so very, very, very welcome and encouraged to email me with any questions, to bounce ideas, any reason at all to tell me your favorite color. You're very welcome.
Well, I feel like this was great. So it looks like, yep, Starly said thank you, and Jessica did too. So I know it's overwhelming at first, but I think that was a great way to dip toes. And I'll make sure that our OTA students, we've got 32 this time, they may want to share it with their teachers, because that's something that keeps coming up in their discussion groups is, I wish I'd known earlier.
Oh yeah, that was my impression too. I think I said that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
One lady's a first year teacher, and she said, honestly, incorporating UDL is going to be easy for her next year. She was in a group with a lady who had been a 19-year veteran, and she said, I do realize we're all creatures of habit, and so to think, well, I have to change now is a little more daunting, but it sounds like they're going through that same mind shift. So I'm pleased with that. Thank you for taking time today to do this. I really appreciate it. Melissa, Starly, Jessica, Tracy, if you all need any information on UDL, again, you can email myself, Erin S@uca.edu, but Shelly House is also, she is a go-getter, and she'll answer very fast. She's great. And she's so positive. So I hope you all know that. She is super positive, which is my nice ray of sunshine, because I tend to be the Debbie Downer sometimes. I'm like, wah, wah, wah. So anyway.
I don't think that you're a Debbie Downer, but thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Bye, guys.